All right. It's that time. It's time for Beyond Sight and Sound. Let's do this. Would you like to optimize your success out in the field? Metal detecting and gold prospecting? One word: Coil Tech. They've been manufacturing high-performance aftermarket coils for years now for popular models such as the E-Track, the Sovereign, the Explorer series, the GPX series, and our favorite, the 10x5 for the CTX 3030. Great target separation in trashy areas, still maintaining excellent depth for the coil size. Coil Tech is optimizing discovery, your potential for success in the field. You can check them out at coiltechmanufacturing.com.au.
All right, we're back and we're live once again. You are listening to Beyond Sight and Sound, metal detecting and treasure hunting radio for all the really cool digging people out there. And as I look into the chat, I see that somehow or another, Jesse made it through the door first tonight. That's a little concerning. It makes me kind of wonder if HomeFinder isn't still MIA somehow, but kudos to Jesse for getting through the gate first there. Also, I see that we've got Bill's ruling the roost tonight. We see that Bill is in, as well as Ohio Relic Hunter Bill. So, the Ohio presence is strong in the house again tonight. Good to see. Obviously, I see Paul, Bob, Gordon, quite a few other names flowing through the chat there. Definitely good to see, always good to see. For those that have never listened before, we're here on Wednesdays, we're here on Sundays, 8 p.m. Eastern, always 8 p.m. Eastern. You can follow us here on Spreaker, iTunes, many of the other wonderful distribution services out there, as well as the wonderful Facebook groups. Also, we see our partner show, I guess you could say in a sense, All Metal Mode is in the house tonight. So welcome to them. Had a number of good comments so far, a number of messages, people looking forward to tuning in to tonight's show. Tonight's show is actually kind of a bit of a special treat for us that we don't normally get to do very often. And that's what's kind of so interesting. And it's also interesting on another level because also for those of you who do listen to the show, obviously you know I am the host here on Beyond Sight and Sound. We all know me, Josh Kimmel. But tonight we've actually got another Kimmel on the show. Don't think we're any relation, but who knows? Somewhere along the line, maybe. But we've actually got Addison Kimmel on tonight to talk with us about archaeology and metal detecting his experiences in archaeology and the archaeological community, his background, as well as his experiences with metal detecting, him getting into the hobby himself and what he's been able to do with that so far. So I think we're going to kind of forego the group shout-outs and other news that we normally bring up at the beginning of the show and just jump right into it and get things rolling here and see how things are going. So, how is it going, Addison?
It's going pretty good, Josh. How are you?
I'm all right. I guess first off, I'd like to say thanks for taking the time to be on with us tonight. This is definitely an interesting treat for the listeners.
That's good. Yeah, I'm very happy to be here.
I'm sure that you've probably heard mention somewhere, maybe either through the archaeological community itself or through speaking with Chuck and Jesse about the Montpelier project.
I have, yes.
What have you, I guess, since we're kind of getting right into that, what do you think about what they're doing at Montpelier?
I mean, I think it's a really innovative program. I mean, I think they aren't, I don't think the first to bring in, really, experienced, detectorists, but, I think some projects out west in the past, some of the battlefield type, archaeological projects have, brought in detectorists in the past, but Montpelier is really the first, I think, to, work with training and to really, I think, bring in these detectorists who have so much experience, so much skill on their machines, really use them to their full potential on a really huge, really important project. They're definitely, I think, the first to do that. So
yeah, I would agree. I mean, where we have seen the use of detectorists and their equipment on some archaeological excavations, as well as, like you had mentioned, battlefield sites and other protected areas, it does seem like Montpelier does seem to do that on a very consistent fashion.
Yes, they're, I think, really the only people that I know of that have, several different kind of digs throughout the year that bring in detectorists. Some of the other ones kind of have one here and there, or maybe have a training, but I think Montpelier is really the first to have, consistent use every year for the last several years, I believe. Yeah,
it's definitely I think it's a good communication tool and educational tool because it does show that archaeology and metal detecting can coexist and work hand in hand. So I guess for those tuning in tonight that maybe they're not sure, who is Addison Kimmel, why don't we go ahead and back up and you can give us a little bit of a background in your career, I guess, how long you've been involved with archaeology, maybe a little bit of the highlights of what you've done so far and everything.
Sure. Yeah, so I've been, like I was just telling Josh, I mean, I didn't realize, but it's almost been 10 years. I think I did my first field school in 2008. And so I've been doing it since 2008. I did my field school in the Bahamas, actually worked in the Caribbean, primarily in the Caribbean for about 5 years. I got a master's at Northwestern during that time. I took a couple years off. I worked in cultural resource management, kind of just floated around the Midwest a little bit. And I ended up, back in school at Iowa. And, hopefully in the next, couple years, I'll be finishing up my PhD. So, I have an NSF grant right now that has been very helpful with that. But, hopefully 2-3 years down the road, I'll be done. That's my goal.
Wow. Well, then, I guess first off, that had to have been quite an experience for you to, spend so much time out in the Bahamas doing that.
Oh yeah, it was crazy. I worked in the Bahamas for, I guess I only worked down there one season. But then I was in Dominica, down in the Eastern Caribbean. I got really hit, by this last hurricane very badly. I worked down there for 2.5 field seasons. I was down there for probably, 5-6 months and, did a lot of work down there. And, At some point I kind of realized I wanted to be a little closer to home, kind of shift my focus. Now I'm working primarily in Northwest Illinois, Western Illinois, Iowa a little bit too.
Nice. Well, how is it that you came to decide, I guess, in a sense, that this was the avenue for you? Did you just up all of a sudden say, you know what, I dug in the sandbox as a kid, why not go be an archaeologist?
Actually, yeah, kind of. I was a history major in undergrad, and I worked in a library for a long time. I kind of thought I might be a librarian or end up, going on to a history PhD. But honestly, I'm relatively allergic to dust. So if I stay in the library for hours, which is what I was doing, I was working there like 10, 12 hours a day. My eyes get really dry and irritated. And I kind of realized, I'd rather be outside. And I realized that archaeology was kind of the avenue to go about doing that, and combine, I still love to do documentary research. I say I have an allergy, but, obviously I'm still in the archives all the time. So, but yeah, it was a way to get outside to still kind of do the historical research I was interested in. And went and did a field school and, kind of got hooked on it.
Oh, wow. So I'm assuming then you decided that that's what you were going to go into, was archaeology, and you just started taking the classes and ran across the field school.
Yep, exactly.
Very nice. Well, then, any interesting things that you had done as far as archaeology goes up until the time that you had, maybe you had never heard of metal detecting until this recent year, or how did that all come about where you finally realized about metal detecting?
So, actually, I've been aware of people having metal detectors and kind of, relic hunting or kind of treasure hunting or whatever. Never really thought a lot about it. It's definitely something in the archaeological community that I think there's a lot of ambivalence about. I think obviously some people, like the people at Montpelier and, some of the national parks, people really love metal detecting and think it's great. But there's, kind of a negative connotation to it too, I think. At least with some people. And I started getting interested in it because I was continuously coming across the issue of, I'm interested in historical period Native American sites in the Midwest. And unfortunately, by the historical period, a lot of Native American groups had kind of stopped producing their own ceramics. They weren't really using ceramics at all, which are, during the woodland and before, it's, ceramics all the time. There's everything. It's how we identify sites. They had stopped producing the lithic technology at kind of the same, at this, the extremely high level that they had before. So we're not really seeing that. It's harder to see these sites. People are picking over these fields. So, the bigger pieces of metal that they left behind are gone. So, I was confronted with this issue of, finding these historical era Native American sites that are obviously there. We know from the historical record that they're, it might not have the same population density in the Midwest that it might have had during the woodland or during the late prehistoric. But you definitely are still, there are a lot of people living here during this time. And, their main artifact types are metal types of artifacts. And so I was, kind of sitting around thinking, and I was like, how do you, find metal? And obviously, metal detecting is the obvious answer to that. So I actually found Jesse on, I think I just Googled, I don't know what I Googled, honestly, to get the result that I got, but I found some presentation I think he did at a library, at a historical society maybe. And I looked him up on Facebook and I sent him a message, and he was, super nice and super helpful, and invited me to come out there and for him to show me around, and that's kind of how it all started.
Oh, wow. Well, it sounds like you kind of found your treasure right there in Jesse.
Yeah. No, he's been an incredible resource.
Oh, absolutely. I've heard about some of the conversations that you two have had, especially about the Native American culture out there.
Yep. I see someone's questioning how nice Jesse is. He puts on a facade, I think, but he is actually pretty nice.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. Great guy. We've talked to him here on the show a number of times, and it's a good possibility he'll be calling in tonight as well.
Cool.
So, you met up with Jesse then, and were you kind of picking his brain maybe about, hey, how does metal detecting work, or did you even know that he was into it at that point?
Yeah, so I guess it was probably, I want to say probably around this time last year, I went down to Prophetstown just for him to kind of show me around. I think it was too cold to do any detecting at that point. But yeah, kind of, I was just picking his brain about kind of where he thought, certain sites might be located. He had a little bit of different idea than some of the people I've been seeing before, and kind of the local historical society folks. Was really able to give me a good read of the lay of the land in that area, and and then what was it? Was it August or? Oh, did I lose you?
Nope, you're good.
Okay, good. I see someone's calling in. So yeah, I think in August we ended up going out, me and Jesse and Chuck Smalley, and they kind of showed me the ropes on the detector, and kind of got me swinging it a little bit, and we had a really good day that day.
Yeah, I would say so. It sounds like that was a very interesting and educational day for you that day.
Yeah, no, it was pretty incredible. I don't know, we were just in a kind of a local park, and they kind of showed me a couple of different things, and just how to the real basics of detecting, and we got out there, and I found a couple coins, and then I found something a lot better than that.
Well, speaking of which, we've got a caller on with us that may be able to help us out a little bit with that day. How's it going, Jesse?
Great. 5 minutes into a detecting career, the guy finds a gold ring.
Not just a gold ring, though. That thing was a honking big ring.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, what was that, 14 or 18 karat? I don't remember. But
I can't remember. It was a big ring, though.
Oh, yeah. Well, he's a big guy.
He is, yeah.
Or was, and then lost weight.
Yeah.
And that like flew off. I ran into him the other night, Addison.
Oh, nice.
And I asked him, hey, you still got that ring? He said, nah, yeah, I got it, but I got to get it resized. He said he went home and swapped his rings out and walks up to his wife and says, hey, look at my wedding ring. She goes, yeah, it's your ring. He goes, no. I said, look at my ring. He goes, yeah, it's your ring. He takes it off and puts it in her hand. It says, look at my wedding ring. And her jaw hit the floor. And she's like, how in the world? And he said, Chuck and his boys found it for us. She was just astounded. Yeah, he mentioned at the park that he wanted to see how long it was going to take for her to notice. Because he's always picking on him for never seeing or noticing anything different. So
that's funny.
Well,
I think you'd like to hear about that.
Right, and certainly kudos to you on finding that ring and doing your first ring return.
Yeah.
Not even an hour into the hobby.
Yep, I think it was about 45 minutes. Maybe even less
Well, yeah,
than
but the
that.
first half hour was like showing you what the detectors can do, and
Yeah.
then we like gave you about 5-10 minutes of training. You were on your own for 5 minutes, and I was like, "Oh crap! Oh, I'm thirsty." I head back to my truck, go get something to drink, and come back, and he's flipping the plug out, and he goes, "I got a ring." I'm like, "What?"
Right, going, what?
Yeah,
No,
what
that
the hell?
just
Like-
ain't right.
I'm like, "Holy crap! You did get a ring." I was thinking he pulled up some kids, costume jewelry.
Yeah,
Oh, heck
apparently you're really going to listen the next time he says he thinks he's got a ring.
Yeah.
What are the odds? I mean, holy cow.
Well, and especially for you, Addison, what was that like to just basically, because I assume this was your first real interaction with a metal detector, actually running one yourself. So
Yeah,
what was that like for you to be able to, hey, wow, what is this? And then you find out that there's a whole story behind it, and you've been able to help reconnect this person with their lost item.
I mean, I thought I was really jazzed just to find, some, whatever quarters from the 90s or whatever. I think I pulled up, a couple quarters and a nickel or something like that. And I was pretty excited about that. And then I think it was the third or fourth thing I even got a hit on. And I pull it out. And at first, yeah, like you said, I think maybe it's like a kid's ring or something. I can't quite see how big it is. And I'm like, Chuck, I think I found something. And he called him up, and I mean, 10, 15 minutes, it's he's there, and I mean, he's just so happy that we were able to find it, and it wasn't really all that close, I don't think, to where he thought he'd lost it. It was probably 10, 15 feet from the little merry-go-round thingy that I think he said he was pushing kids on, and just somewhere that nobody would have really thought to look. Not really a place I don't think you would have really been walking in that park. So yeah, it was awesome to see him and meet him. And yeah, of course, like you said, someone said on there, like hitting a home run, the first time up to bat. So
Right, yeah, nothing like starting off with a bang.
yeah.
So that had to, I assume then that was a very fulfilling experience for you.
Yeah, it was cool to see kind of, I don't know what you would call it, but like the detectorist culture or whatever. Just a lot of kind of the unwritten rules about, returning people's, lost items. And, obviously I think, maybe the unfortunate stereotype for you guys is that, you're hunting and you find a ring or whatever and it's yours. No effort would be made to return it. And, Chuck that was the first thing, is like, he knows who this ring is, who it belongs to. And, that was the first priority, was really getting it back to the rightful owner. So I thought it was cool to kind of see that in the first, 30 minutes I was out there too.
Yeah, I think that really worked out great because, like you said, there's a lot of bad connotation for some of us in the hobby. And for you coming in and just starting to use a detector yourself and actually getting to see and experience firsthand the good things that can be done with the hobby and the impact that has on other people's lives.
Yeah, no, it was super cool. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
Awesome.
and that's one reason why I'm big on trying to get out there with Addison, to help bridge that gap between us. We're not as bad as y'all seem to think we are. He gets it.
Right, we're not all out there looting and pillaging.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely true. I mean, I've been super impressed with everyone I met so far. I mean, I think, Jesse knows about as much about the Lower Rock River Valley as anybody out there, and Chuck definitely knows his history too. And I don't think I've met anyone out there right now who's kind of just in it for the money or whatever. I don't know if you can be really into it just for the money now that I see how much everything costs. Yeah, you're selling a couple $5 coins on eBay or whatever, but it's gotta sell 1,000 of those to make your make back that detector that you just bought. So
right, to pay for your investment, so to speak.
Yeah.
Well, then I'm sure that obviously with you being involved with Jesse and Chuck, first off, you're definitely in with the right crowd. They're very upstanding, very ethical and professional about the hobby. So that's great that you got in with the right people. And then I'm sure that your experience archaeologically, as well as speaking with Jesse, I'm sure that you have seen the advantage that can come from metal detecting and archaeology working together.
Oh yeah, no, I'm really excited to really get out and do some real survey stuff with the detector. I think it's going to be, people just really haven't used it on these historical era sites in the Midwest, at least, and I think it could really, revolutionize might be going a little bit too far, but I definitely think it could really jumpstart the discovery of a lot of these sites that date to that kind of early 19th century period that we just really haven't looked at yet.
Right, maybe be a little bit of a game changer, kind of get you into the hot spot a little quicker, hopefully.
Exactly.
I see. Well, then, with doing that, hopefully the weather gets nicer soon so that you can get out and try that. Is this something where, like normally you may go out and dig like a couple of survey holes or something and examine the dirt? Is this something where you would think, well, now I can just go out with a detector and kind of find a hot area with multiple targets and dig there? Is that kind of the application you plan to use it as?
A mix of that, I think. The stuff that I've seen, Jesse can talk a little bit about what they do at Montpelier, but I actually just saw, I was at the Midwest conference last week, and there are actually a couple people who are using detectors on two battlefield sites in Indiana, and they had this real big grid. They had gridded it out with these long ropes, and they were having kind of these 5-foot wide runway kind of things that they were having the detectorists walk down and just swing their detectors, and then they were marking everything. And it was just a really, really fast way to get the hot spots. On a site like that, obviously, these are huge battlefields. You're missing, and negative information, like everyone says, is information, but you still, to identify a site, you still want to find some stuff. And detectors can really help expedite that process a lot. And someone's asking about fast and easy ways to record and document finds. The one thing that really sticks out to me was some of the newer, nicer detectors that Chuck was showing me. A lot of them, it looks like they have a pretty decent GPS system in there that you can keep track of finds. I know that the OSA has used. They haven't really used. The OSA is the state archaeologist here in Iowa. They haven't done a lot of metal detecting, but on some of their kind of their walking survey type things, they've used a lot of the handheld GPS stuff, and you can get a really nice handheld GPS now that does pretty close to survey grade work for a couple $100. Maybe for a really nice one, you're talking about a lot more. But those two things are kind of the top ones I would use. And I mean, even thinking now, you can get on Google Maps on your phone and you can put yourself, you can geolocate yourself. It's not, survey grade. It's not within, centimeters, but, we're talking about, a couple meters accuracy, which was unheard of 20 years ago.
Oh yeah, 20 years ago you wouldn't have done that. You'd have been, 15 meters maybe.
Exactly. But yeah, even I have a $50 little track phone type thing, and it can get you pretty dang close. But yeah, field notebook type stuff. I mean, a lot of archaeologists just kind of, will take notes about the context and, 50 yards from the tall oak on the corner of the cornfield or something like that. And that stuff really, people move their fields around a little bit, but you still have some control with that. And, honestly, taking photographs, especially because a lot of the photographs, if you take one with your phone or with a nicer, I haven't looked at cameras in years, but probably can do it with the cheap stuff now. A lot of times your photo is geolocated there automatically without you ever having to do anything. So, you
Right.
take a picture of the find in the ground and it's got your coordinates right there.
Right.
And so that's really helped. I know. Someone's got a question about do you have to go to school to join an archaeological team?
Good question.
That is a good question. I mean, the short answer is no. You definitely don't. I would definitely say, an undergraduate degree in anthropology or history is definitely helpful. Having that kind of a field school experience where you're getting formal training in archaeology is helpful. But I definitely know people who are, going out and, if not making a career out of it, but definitely making some money on the side. Really hardworking field work type people.
Or at the very least, maybe volunteering their service.
Yeah, exactly. You can volunteer, and when people see how hard you're working, in your volunteer hours, and I know that a couple of the companies I used to work for hired, their favorite volunteers basically to come back next year and do it for pay. So
nice.
Yeah,
Note to self, Jesse.
Yeah. Definitely don't need a degree.
Nice. So when you're out in the field, because you've seen how detectorists will go through and recover an item, and a lot of times that's where the major use of willpower comes into play, I guess, in archaeology, because you start to unsurface a target, and we're going, "What? Give us a shovel. We can get it out of there." What all is entailed, I guess, when you recover an object in the archaeological sense? Because I know context is obviously a big part, the orientation in the ground and things like that. So what all is entailed if you were out on, say, a survey and you did a little test dig or something, got your hole there, and you ran across, say, a button or a bullet?
Sure. So, I mean, if you're doing kind of, your standard, they often call it a phase 1 survey where you're walking a field, or maybe you're doing shovel test pits. So you'll set up your grid, usually based on some sort of datum point, like a tree or a corner of the field or something like that, like I mentioned. You'll kind of just walk in a straight line, and say you're digging shovel tests, every 10 meters or so, or something along those lines. In terms of context for that, a shovel test pit would be kind of a 30 by 30 centimeter hole, usually go down, anywhere from 30 centimeters to a meter. And in terms of kind of, getting out your little brush and brushing artifacts to make sure they don't get out of their matrix or whatever, you wouldn't be doing it on that kind of survey. But if you're doing, a full scale excavation of a site, where you're doing excavation squares or excavation pits, you're aiming for the most controlled excavation you can, and it can definitely be painful when you're, they call it pedestaling an artifact, or if you get it right there in context and you going down around it and trying not to knock it off or move it, and making sure you're documenting it and getting it shot in with your transit, and that whole deal. And that can definitely be, I think that's hard for even archaeologists to resist moving stuff at that point.
I can understand how it could be. Yes, definitely. So it sounds like then when you're doing just the test pits, in a sense, you guys are doing it the same way as we are.
Yeah, it's not too different. It really isn't. The one difference would be that you're just, they're placed at random intervals. You dig whether you find anything or not, whether you get a hit or not. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty much the same thing.
Okay. And then, obviously, once you get more into it, that's where you really get into the detail, and I assume you're really writing things down in your log and stuff like that. Yeah. Probably even some form of mapping software in the end, or how do you...
A lot of people use a total station, where you can basically shoot it with a laser and get the elevation and the exact point of your different artifacts. LiDAR is kind of the big, I would say it's new technology. It's not particularly new.
Just becoming more available.
It's becoming very, very much more available. But shooting millions of laser points and getting really incredible spatial data very, very extremely quickly. And I mean, I think that is going to revolutionize and is in the process of revolutionizing archaeology right now. So yeah, I mean, it can get such incredible spatial information in just a few minutes. That would have taken hours and hours, if not months.
Right. And that's one of those where as that information becomes more easily accessible, I guess there's even been a number of us detectorists that have been watching LiDAR for potential site locations as well.
Oh yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of it become more publicly available. I would say a LiDAR unit right now is probably not within the price range of most people, but
right.
And yeah, somebody on here says the files are huge. They're giant, and I mean, you really do have to have a professional setup to run them right now. I can't run them on my laptop. You really have to go into the university still to do it because you have these it's literally I think billions of points in some cases. The new one that they had out there this summer was I think he said like 1 million points a second. So if you do that for 30 seconds, you already got 30 million points. So
yeah, on your standard computer, your processor's going, whoa, wait a minute, slow down here. I can't do this.
Yeah, it's crazy. I was like, UK has all the LiDAR maps online. That's interesting. I didn't know that. I think that's definitely. I think we're gonna move towards that here, hopefully, especially as they get better and start doing more of the aerial stuff.
Well, and that is a good point, too, with, like you said, you still do a lot of the archive research and stuff like that. I'm sure that you've found that with the advances in technology that we've had, many of these resources are available to us online. That has certainly kind of sped things up for your situation, hasn't it?
Oh yeah, I mean it's changed everything. You don't have to go in and deal with the microfilm anymore, and or pull out the old maps, and find the stuff. It's nice.
Do you find
speaking on the research side of it, does the archaeological community understand the amount of research that metal detectors actually do on some of these sites? I mean,
that's a good question.
I've spent 2 years looking for that village that I was talking to you about. Do they understand that there's an untapped resource out there? These guys in their own local areas that just do massive amounts of research looking for these spots.
Yeah, because they're basically, amateur historians right there, right in their own backyard.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think archaeologists realize that at all, because I definitely did not. Drone-mounted LiDAR, somebody just mentioned, that's a great idea. But yeah, I definitely didn't realize it. What was the rest of that question? Sorry.
Oh, I was just, curious if they really understood how much research we're doing and they could tap into this knowledge and we can together put our informations together and find more of these spots.
I think a lot of the interactions that people have had with the archaeologists, especially in the past, have had with detectors, and then kind of before that, collectors. You're really, you're talking, I think the stereotype is kind of the old farm guy, doesn't really know much about it other than it's on his land, and, kind of has picked up these little, airheads or whatever for years and years. And, hasn't really done a lot of research. And I think, that was kind of the old school collector guy that everybody in archaeology was used to working with. And I think, with people like you and everybody I've come across, the amount of research you guys have done, it's crazy. I mean, it's basically professional level research in a lot of cases. And I just don't think, I don't think most people know that or have realized that at all. I think, as people do, I think that, you guys will get a lot more, attention for sure. And somebody on here is asking about faking finds. I will say that archaeologists do not fake finds anymore. I don't think, for the most part. Here in Davenport, we have, the Davenport tablets that were found in, early 20th century. Those are definitely fake. I'm trying to think, the last really true fake find that I can think of, I can't even remember the guy's name. There's a big time professor. He made a lot of money, I think, in real estate out in New Mexico. But he was a very prominent New Mexico professor. And he definitely faked some finds. He faked the Sandia points, and he claimed that, and this was in the 40s. That's the last real fake find that I can think of. I don't think anyone that I know of has faked a find in a very long time. So at least the past 70 years or so.
I like the way you put that. It's kind of like, well, that's not to say it hasn't happened.
Yes, it has happened. But I would say not so much anymore. I think it would be hard to do at this point.
Well, and unfortunately, in our hobby, we run across that from time to time ourselves too, in a sense.
Yes.
Well, it's interesting the commonalities, I guess, in a sense that you see between archaeology and metal detecting, and I think that especially in, say, recent years, those in the archaeological community that view us with an open mind, it seems that it's a bit of an eye-opener when they see the amount of effort we put into the research and all of that. And I think they're starting to realize now that we're not necessarily out there just lollygagging around or something. We're serious about what we do, and we try to do it the best that we can.
Yeah, no, I think is, like I said, for me, I just had no idea that there were people out here, doing this level of research and really that interested in it. And hopefully, I'm hoping that other archaeologists kind of start to realize that.
Right, definitely. Now, is this something where, like, maybe you've mentioned it to some of your other friends that are involved in the archaeological community? Have they seemed to have kind of scoffed at you for getting interested in detecting?
People have been really open to it, I think. When I was at the conference last week, really everyone I talked to, they had a big symposium about professional archaeologists working with kind of avocational archaeologists and working with collectors. And they unfortunately didn't really talk about metal detecting at all. It was really mostly about people who collected, prehistoric lithics and points and things like that. But I think that kind of as as kind of this new generation of collectors who really are very interested, very invested in the research. I think as you guys continue to be out there and do your thing, I think people are really open to it. Is my impression. So
yeah, it does seem like they're starting to become more receptive to the idea, I think, as far as us working together like that.
Yes. And the Montpelier people, I think, especially, because, I mean, Terry Brock is really, he's very out there in terms of he's really kind of spreading the gospel of metal detecting and working with avocationalists. And they're at Montpelier, which is this really, very prominent site. Really important early U.S. history site, and they're I can't remember the other guy's name off the top of my head.
Matt Reeves.
Matt Reeves, yeah, they're both very very out there, kind of on the forefront, talking about it at all the big conferences. So I think those two especially, and they have a lot of connections. I think Reeves went to Syracuse and Terry Brock went to Michigan State. Both really big schools, a lot of connections, and I think as people like that kind of buy into it, I think the perception's definitely changing a lot. Right,
and I'm sure that they're doing a lot to kind of pave the road for us.
Oh yeah, they have everything's online, and they're always advertising on Facebook and stuff like that. So.
Right. What were you going to say, Jesse?
With the success they've had with that program at Montpelier, and having archaeologists do their dissertations and whatnot through that program, they're talking about starting a very similar program at Monticello and Jefferson's place.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, that would be a really great program. I'm sure that might be even more popular.
Right. And also would go a long way to helping to kind of keep both sides of it in a good light, both the metal detectorists and the archaeologists.
Yeah, that's right. It's definitely true.
I could see that going a long way. So for like you in your position, do you have any, say, tips or recommendations? How would someone go about maybe becoming more involved in working hand in hand with archaeology if they were a detectorist and interested in doing that sort of thing?
Probably the people who are going to be most interested. Oh, can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. Around here we have the state archaeologist in Iowa City. And most states have some sort of kind of state agency that does archaeological work and archaeological consulting. And I know, I don't know how many people here are from Iowa or from Western Illinois, but the state archaeologist in Iowa is always looking for people who want to volunteer, want to come out. They haven't worked a lot with detectorists in the past, but they have had one or two, I believe, who have come out and kind of done a little bit of exploratory stuff. But they have a really long history of working really closely with collectors, avocational archaeologists, kind of amateur historians, things like that. Illinois has the Illinois State Archaeological Survey. They tend to be a little less responsive. I'll tell you that off the bat. But
right, obviously some are going to be more receptive than others.
They're very nice, and I think they would be open to it. They're just super busy, and it's Illinois, so the state funding is not as good. And but yeah, I mean most states have some sort of agency like that. Ohio actually has one of the smaller ones. I think I saw that they were changing their structure, but Kentucky has, I think the Commonwealth archaeological something or other. So yeah, if you just kind of Googled, state archaeological agency in whatever state you live in, I think that's probably the best place to start.
So is this something? Is this something where it would be better for a person to maybe approach, like you said, the State Archaeological Society and just bypass your local historical societies right off the bat? Or would it be maybe more of an advantage to contact their local historical societies?
I would say generally the local historical societies tend to not be as tuned in to the archaeological side of things. State historical societies, depending on the state, can be really helpful. Ohio would be, I think, that would be probably the number one person I would contact in Ohio. But if you contacted the Iowa State Historical Society, they'd send you straight to the state archaeologist. So it kind of depends on the state. But yeah, the state level agencies, I think, tend to be a little bit more helpful with that kind of thing, at least in my experience, not always.
Right. Now, is this something where if a detectorist would approach, say, yourself, do you just, do many archaeologists, I guess, just say, oh yeah, come along, we'll kind of tell you what we want you to do? Or is there more kind of like a background check process where it's like, well, I don't know, how versed are you in history? How versed are you with your machine?
I mean, I would say, at least in my experience of working in archaeology, I think people are very open to volunteers coming out. Usually people are looking for volunteers of some sort, even if metal detecting might not be, a fit on, an archaic site or something like that. I mean, people are looking for free or cheap labor whenever they can get it. So, yeah, I mean, I think I'm definitely not doing a background check. I think everyone I've worked with has been really, very experienced, but
right. Or maybe just kind of go, well, this guy vouches for him, so yeah, he's a good guy, so this guy's probably all right as well.
But yeah, I think people are very open to, volunteers in general, and definitely experienced, detectorists and collectors and things like that for sure.
Nice. Any recommendations possibly or tips as to maybe a better way that people as detectorists could go about recovering the history that they find in a more documented fashion?
I mean, I think, just, documenting is really the big thing. Getting coordinates or close coordinates, like I don't remember who was talking about, but definitely writing down kind of the context of your finds in a notebook. Keeping good track of that. Those are really the two main things right there. Just recording your finds, period. I think that's the main, at the conference I was at, the main complaint about collectors wasn't that they had, collected all this incredible archaeological material, is they had collected it all and they had no idea where it came from.
Right, now it's no longer in context where it's...
Exactly.
Where did you find all them arrowheads? Oh, it was out in the backfield somewhere.
Yeah. That was more context, At least in the backfield, you could have some idea.
Well, yeah.
But yeah, just, keeping detailed notes, taking notes every time you go out, getting some coordinates down, noting depth, things like that. Yeah, those would be the main things I would think of.
Okay. Any sort of viewpoint on, because I'm sure Jesse's probably mentioned to you at some point in the past that many times we do try to preserve or even restore the items that we find. Has he ever mentioned to you at any point about some of the processes that we use to do that?
I have not talked to him too much about that, I don't think.
Oh.
Not a whole lot. But
Okay.
yeah, that's another major thing that we do that I don't think gets noticed so much. That we are trying to save the things that we find through electrolysis or, delicate cleaning and not trying to further damage and then, preserve if we can whatever we do find.
Right. Or maybe, I guess it would be better worded if, like when you're out on an archaeological dig or anything, and you do recover said item, what sort of process do you normally go through to try and preserve or restore it, or do you leave that up to someone else?
It depends. If you're thinking about kind of you take your kind of average, let's say farmstead site or something like that, where you have a good collection of, you got some metal artifacts, you have some, a good amount of ceramic artifacts, you have some maybe food remains, like bones, maybe a little bit of, what else would you find? So maybe some masonry or something like that. In terms of preservation, honestly, on a site like that, you wouldn't, preserve. I mean, you would preserve it, but you're really thinking about curation, kind of where you're going to be storing it, making sure that you do have some sort of agreement with, say, a museum or an archaeological society or something like that. But in terms of preserving artifacts, the main thing we do is we clean them. We make sure they're bagged up. In some cases, some people like to label them, some people don't. I'm kind of anti-labeling in terms of labeling each artifact with ink on it. Not a real big fan of that, but, making sure that everything is sorted, cleaned. For metal artifacts, we don't tend to do a lot of any kind of invasive type stuff. We tend to kind of leave them be to some degree, just kind of dry brush them with a toothbrush or something like that. Yeah, I mean, the washing process for your average archaeological site, I think, is kind of the big preservation step, to be honest with you. Now, if you're talking about, a giant Viking ship or something like that you find in a bog, that's a whole nother thing there. But
Yeah, a little difficult to just wash it off.
yes, yeah. Yeah, for the most part, it's wash it, put it in a bag and label it with all the contextual information. And, honestly, the vast majority of archaeological material sits on shelves in cardboard boxes and plastic bags. So, so the archaeologists would keep the original records, obviously all the contextual information, that you collected. And then the museum, you turn it over usually to a museum or some sort of curation facility, who will preserve the record for it. Will be how that usually works. And usually you have an agreement. You actually, in most states, before you do any type of archaeological work, you have to have a curation agreement. You have to have somebody who agrees that they're gonna keep this material for at least some significant period of time. You can't just kind of go and do archaeological work, generally speaking, definitely on public land, without having some sort of agreement like that.
Okay. So you guys are just, I assume, primarily using just water to wash these items off, much like we do with some of our coins and such?
Yeah, generally just water. I mean, sometimes, some people I've seen use I'm trying to think of what exactly it is. Some people have I think some people use like baking soda and stuff like that, but honestly, I've only ever used water.
I see. And because that's always been kind of a long-running debate in the detecting hobby is, do I clean it? Don't I clean it? If I do, how far is too far?
Yeah.
So for some, if they go ahead and they do try to clean it and restore it and say they use some sort of a sealer to seal the air off of it, and they've got it looking all nice in their display case, does that make it potentially of less interest to the archaeological eye?
I mean, it would depend on what it is. You know, if you have like I don't know, somehow you found like a whole ceramic pot or something like that might have, you know, food residue or something on the inside, and then you lacquer it off inside. Yeah, I mean, something like that would kind of temper the archaeological interest in it. But yeah, generally speaking, you know, that kind of stuff isn't going to make it, isn't going to, you know, quote unquote ruin it for the archaeologists, I don't think. I think a lot of that kind of stuff really has more to do with, you know, ruining it for the seller's market, I think, honestly.
Okay, so basically, as long as, say, like, Jesse goes out and recovers this item and does what he does with it and maybe cleans it up, makes it look nice in a display case and all of that, as long as he's still kept his notes, say, of when he found it or coordinates and maybe even a description and photos of it, then that would probably be more appealing in a sense to the archaeological eye than just,
oh yeah, absolutely,
like you said, some farmer's got a box of arrowheads in his house.
Yep. Yeah, that would be if every collector, every detectorist did that, you know, that would be great. I mean, that would there'd be a whole archaeological record out there that we could easily access, and that's really kind of what we're looking for.
Right. Okay. So that, I mean, because questions like that, information like that, I think could go a long way for helping to change the perspective on both sides of the fence. You know, the detectorists have a little better idea of what the archaeologists are looking for, and likewise the other way around.
Yep. And somebody on here, they're talking about the UK work. I'm somewhat familiar with it. I know they've really formalized relationships with detectorists and with avocational archaeologists, and they have been for, you know, the last, you know, probably 30 or 40 years. And I think, you know, that's something that, you know, government agencies here probably, you know, at least need to look into and hopefully learn from. Though, I mean, you know, you're talking about the UK historical and archaeological record is definitely a little bit different than here.
Yeah,
you know,
it goes a little further back.
A lot more metal going a lot further back. So I think, you know, the immediate helpfulness of detectorists was, you know, very evident in the UK. And maybe it isn't quite as evident here to some archaeologists, but yeah, I mean, I would definitely hope that, you know, it moves more towards that UK model where they're, you know, really utilized in all kinds of archaeological work.
Yeah, I mean, the way it sounds, that's definitely worked out very well for a number of reasons over there,
yeah, I mean,
and that is
some crazy finds from what I've heard.
Absolutely. And that is something where we have said for years it'd be great if the states would get something like that in place. It could be an advantage.
Oh, yeah. I actually didn't know. Someone on here said UK has a metal detecting council. I didn't know that. It was that formalized. But I did know they had some kind of formal agreements with detectorists and collectors and things like that. That's really cool.
Right. Absolutely. Likewise, for the other side of the fence, like I said, sometimes it all changes perspective. And for us in the hobby, sometimes we hear how in some cases archaeologists will go out and they will unearth some items, but then they'll turn around and bury them again rather than taking them out of the ground.
Yes.
Can you explain that for some that may not understand the reasoning behind that?
So that's kind of become, actually, you know, about 5 years, I would say 5 to 10 years ago, when people started to do the quote unquote, they call it a lot of different things, but like non-invasive archaeology or less invasive archaeology, where they're kind of reburying as they go. So a lot of the impetus behind that is what I was talking about in terms of curation at museums. There's generally speaking, in most parts of the United States, there's a real shortage of space to house archaeological collections. So it's addressing that, very immediate need to not create gigantic, issues with space and museums and things like that. But there are a lot of people who just kind of think, that it is like Mark's saying here in the chat, that it's just better to leave it there. They take, that we can't really do much more. And especially in this age, we have we have 3D printers, we have things like that, we have LiDAR, all these things that can see stuff in context. We don't quote unquote need to just have to be storing the actual stuff. And that, it's ethically and whatnot better to leave it there if you can do that. I actually haven't encountered a lot of that. It hasn't. I think it's actually gone a little bit. I don't want to say out of style. It won't go out of style because, we do still have a shortage. But I think, for instance, Iowa is getting another huge storage space. Like Jim's saying here on the chat, I mean, one of the huge issues is, putting it back in the ground really is truly asking for it to be lost forever.
Right, because I'm sure I understand the concept because it keeps it in its natural environment, its matrix, if you will. But for some of those items, it could also potentially mean a loss of the item because it could potentially rot away to nothing.
Yeah, and I mean there are other issues in terms of some tribes prefer it if they're on tribal ground, which I think that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely.
But yeah, a lot of it is more of a probably less of an ethical issue and more of a space issue. But the people who do that kind of archaeology definitely, they really go overboard on the context stuff. And a lot of them do take, multiple photos of every object they recover, even small finds. But yeah, I think, Mark's comment on here in terms of, reporting and then kind of registering each item is an interesting way and probably a good way that we could, overcome problems like that. But yeah, I have never actually seen it in person, anyone doing that kind of archaeology in person. In Iowa, we definitely still recover everything. The OSA is really lucky in that it does have a very large space. The Illinois actually has a pretty decent amount of space for curation. And like Jim's saying, some people will take it back to the lab for a bit. Do things like 3D scannings, things like that, and then take it back and rebury it. Some people just try to do all that kind of stuff in the field. There are ways, especially for larger objects, you can use a compass and a transit and kind of get, basic idea of how it sits and what its, exact geometric values are, things like that. You can do a lot with photography now. You can do the kind of panoramic photography stuff. But I think especially out west too, where they're doing a lot of cultural resource management work that they always complain about. It's like they have the 50-year rule out there where it's just anything older than 50 years has to kind of be looked at. A lot of people have issues with that.
Yeah, I know that's
so
a big one out
it's
in
basically
California.
trash. And so, it's like, why collect all this trash and have it sit in our museums when no one's really using it? But But yeah, like I said, I've never seen it. I don't think it's going to spread out here too much, but yeah, it's interesting you brought that up.
Well, yeah, I think it is good that that came up because of the fact that for some people in the hobby out there, maybe they have this misconception that that's the way all archaeological digs are done, and the way it sounds, that's not it's not necessarily the most popular way of things being done.
I would say it is. It went through a big kind of popularity phase, 5 years ago or so, and you were hearing about it all the time. It's kind of, I think, dropped off a little bit, but definitely part of that's where I am. I'm in the Midwest, and like I said, I think it's a little more popular out west.
Nice. So that might be something for people to think about too if they're looking to get involved, volunteer their services for archaeology, that not all of those items are just going to be buried again and forgotten.
Yes.
That's definitely good to know. Very refreshing too, actually. Might give some detectorists out there a different perspective on...
That's interesting that is kind of a... that's an interesting misconception. And like I said, I don't live out west. I've never worked out west. I mostly worked in the Midwest and the Caribbean where, we collect everything. I just never would have thought that was kind of a stereotype. That's interesting.
Yeah, because for some detectorists, they kind of look at it like, well, that's kind of daft. Why would they do that? Then it's just in the ground to rot to nothing and it's not replaceable.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting that people think that. I would have never guessed.
Well, and I'm sure that's not to say that we all... Go ahead, Jesse.
Yeah, of course not, yeah.
There's something I'd like Addison to spread throughout the archaeological community, when he talking about his experience, that we would like to see the archaeologists use the experienced detectors rather than them going out and trying to eliminate a middleman. You see like Josh Gates on his programs out there running a detector with a coil put on backwards.
Yeah, and holding it 8 inches off the ground.
Oh, man.
Yeah. It would do them better to have people with really good experience on their machines out there helping you.
Yes, like we like to say in the hobby, you don't necessarily need a detector, you need a detectorist. Because
no, I
then
think that's definitely
you
true.
don't have to try to learn the machine, you have the experience of the user.
Yeah. When we went out that first time, and I've still, only been out, a handful of times really, just kind of doing it locally. And I'm still trying to figure it out. I'm still getting, I might have found that ring the first time, but I'm still, I can't tell the difference between anything. And, definitely don't have that fine-grained experience.
Well, much like with your field school, I guess we all have to put our time in.
Yep, exactly.
That's where the advantage of the detectorist comes in, and you've definitely got some great mentors on your side with Jesse and Chuck.
Yeah. I'm definitely very very happy I found those guys.
Now, is this kind of something, I don't know, Jesse, have the I&I Club ever approached Addison to maybe speak at a group meeting? Or is that something where you've had that experience, Addison?
I have not had that experience. I am actually, I was going to tell Jesse this on Friday when I see him, but I am going to be giving a presentation, kind of talking hopefully about, what we're going to be doing on Friday, and my experience, kind of the same stuff we were talked about today. But I'm going to be giving a presentation at the Bettendorf Library in, I think, January.
Oh, nice.
So I am kind of trying to get out there, and hopefully I'm going to get to some meetings and things like that to really, kind of spread the word.
Right, because I mean, for like on Jesse's part of it with the I&I group and everything, I think that would be a really interesting talk to have you come into an I&I group meeting and just kind of discuss what you've seen so far, the advantages that metal detecting could bring to archaeology, and the experience that you've had thus far with people in the hobby, and it may even enlighten some of the group members, because I'm sure I've met a number of the I&I members myself. They're all very friendly, very helpful people.
Oh, yeah.
But there are probably some out there that are a little wary because they're not sure how to necessarily approach the prospective archaeology, where
Sure.
that could definitely open doors or just enlighten them a bit and make them more receptive to possibly in the future potentially working hand in hand with archaeologists.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I would definitely be interested in doing that. And, someone here, let's see, we have another question. Talking about any of my personal projects and what are my local interests. Really what I'm interested in, like I was saying, was these historical period Native American sites here in Northwest Illinois and, a little bit in Iowa. I'm really interested in how Native people were responding to intensified removal efforts from the U.S. government. So, we're talking about obviously, things like the Black Hawk War on kind of a really big scale there, but just kind of everyday adaptation and changes in their culture during this, the removal period. So we're talking about, the early 19th century, post 1812, War of 1812, into about kind of the 1840s. And yeah, so I'm hoping to get a little bit of excavation down there in the Prophetstown area. Looking for some sites probably associated hopefully with the Prophets Village, that was down there right around the Black Hawk War period. And associated as kind of a really interesting, kind of ragtag group of Native Americans at this time, who were allied with the Black Hawk. Definitely, yeah. So he mentioned on the chat the fur trade. They were definitely doing some fur trading with George Davenport, things like that. I'm not necessarily interested in. There's kind of a whole subset of archaeology, fur trade archaeology. I'm not necessarily interested in that super intensively. But yeah, these people were involved in the fur trade. They definitely had their culture changed with the advent of really intensified fur collection and fur trading.
Right. So is this something where
That's along.
Right?
That's my wheelhouse right there.
Exactly. You two are like peas in a pod for that.
Yeah, no, Jesse has been incredible. I mean, he's been helping me just, get the lay of the land in that area. He's been, nobody knows it better than him that I can tell. So definitely he'll get a big thank you in my dissertation, hopefully.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, nice. Definitely.
Yeah, that's my life goal, is to find that village. Because what they tell us growing up just never made sense, and that's why I got into it. And I dug further into the archives down at Illinois and got into the actual first-hand accounts that they've acquired and luckily digitized, so it isn't lost forever. And started putting things together with my working knowledge of the area and started getting a better feel for it than others had. And that helps a lot.
Right, absolutely. Now, is this something where you're primarily interested in a certain specific number of particular tribes, or just the entire Native American culture altogether?
So it is, yeah. It's a number of tribes. By that point, living in the Prophets Village, for instance, it was kind of several different groups. We're talking the Ho-Chunk were living there, the Kickapoo, the Sauk, and the Meskwaki. likely some other kind of
Potawatomi.
Potawatomi. We're all living there kind of at the same time in the region. Kind of lost my train of thought there, but so yeah, kind of those specific those groups specifically, and their kind of responses to these new challenges during that period.
Nice. Very nice. And obviously you can tell Jesse does know his information on it.
Yes, he does.
You guys will make a good
yes,
team.
He does.
And I really got into the parallels and interconnections between the whole chunk that were here, say, early 1800, and the ones that were in Ohio and Indiana, Kaskatawak, Tecumseh. Yet our group that was here where I'm at went over and was like the right-hand guard of Tecumseh. And there's a lot of intermingling history there. In fact, some of the Shawnee that were there came back with these guys and lived among them. And when you start getting into the offshoot stuff, that's where it really starts perking up.
Yeah, the interconnectedness in the Midwest during that period was really pretty incredible. Really thinking about them as, these individual tribes like we think about them now, since they're, federally recognized, they have their own, land claims, things like that. It's, that kind of model doesn't really work, especially in this really late frontier period, where there was a lot of, intermingling between different groups, intermarriage, stuff like that.
Nice. So is this something that your interest in it brought you to Illinois, or were you specifically called out by a university or something to address this task?
I was living in Chicago. I guess at that time I was living in Chicago. I was working in CRM. I was kind of in the process of transitioning. I got my master's already. I was in the process of transitioning to, I guess I don't want to say being a Caribbean expert, but kind of having that as my research focus, and then transitioning to kind of a more Midwestern focus. During that time when I was working in CRM, and I was kind of, I wasn't really even connected with the university at that time. It was really when I got into the, kind of the Native American, interactions in the Midwest, topic. And then I ended up, I got into a bunch of schools and who are all kind of with professors who are interested in that kind of project. And I ended up at Iowa because I was already living in the Quad Cities at that time. I moved out there. Kind of just, very fortuitous. But yeah, no kidding, working in the Bahamas or Illinois, but and CRM is cultural resource management, sorry. So kind of non-academic contract archaeology. I actually really I love working in the Midwest. I've had a lot of fun here.
I think really, the weather's got to be a little better in the Caribbean, though.
The weather, it depends. It depends on what you, whether you want to be, choking on your sweat, or if you want to be freezing by September. But
that is a good point.
I really have. I've liked working in the Midwest. I honestly, I've had just as much fun here as I did there. But yeah, I mean, the Bahamas are obviously great. So.
Well, just think if you had stayed there and got into the archaeology and the history part, you could been out there shipwreck hunting.
Yeah, exactly. That was actually
looking for square nails.
Right. Then he'd be Addison treasure diver.
Yeah. When I was I originally thought I wanted to go into underwater archaeology, and then I went out and I took well, I didn't even take the class. I started a diving class, and I realized that I could not, my ears just couldn't equalize the pressure. So that was kind of out for me, and I had to do the land stuff, but...
Well, it sounds like it's going to prove to be very fulfilling for you, though.
I think so, yeah. I mean, I'm finally kind of getting into my own research now, and it's been a lot of fun. Looking forward to working more with you guys and with Jesse, obviously, and everybody out there, so yeah.
Well, that is certainly awesome. I know we've kept you on quite some time. I guess we probably ought to be letting you go, but before we do
all right,
that...
and yeah, I mean, Mark just mentioned the Bahamas have shut down everything now. They will not let outside shipwreck divers in at all,
wow.
except in like very specific circumstances. The guy who runs the AMMC, I believe, museums, monuments, and something. He's really anti shipwreck recovery in general. But yeah, that's my spiel on that.
Well, maybe that's something where in the future it'll change.
Yeah, I'll see. I think they had so many issues with basically looting, and they were losing kind of control of it. With some of the big, treasure hunting companies, I guess you would call them. And then having all those lawsuits with foreign governments, and they didn't want to deal with that either, I don't think. It's understandable.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Way too much headache. Definitely. Well, and I noticed we did get a number of questions out of the chat, so that was definitely nice. And
that was really good.
Certainly a pleasure for Jesse to call in and hang in there with us as well. But before we go, I'll give both of you guys an opportunity to mention anything else you may like to mention, where people may be able to find you if you're interested in that sort of thing, anything like that. So I'll just leave the floor to you two for a few minutes.
Sure, yeah. I mean, anybody can, if you Google my name plus Iowa, I'm sure I come up. My email, if anybody wants to email me, is Addison, Addison -Kimmel, Kimmel, at uiowa.edu. So if anyone wants to contact me there, I check my email all the time. I usually get back to people within a 12-hour period or so. I think you can find me on Facebook. I can't remember what my privacy settings are anymore, but search me there too if you want to try. But yeah, anybody who wants to ask me any follow-ups or volunteer for my dissertation work, I will definitely get in touch.
And you can find us both on my Rock River History Research
right.
and Recovery group too. So.
Oh yeah, very good point, Jesse.
Both of us. Look us up. I'll add you on.
Yeah, which I'll give it a couple of minutes. Maybe somebody can even drop that link into the chat too, so they've got a direct link to the group right there. If someone can drop that in, or maybe you are near a computer or something where you can even drop it in the chat.
Yeah, I don't know how to do that.
That's all right.
Very techy.
I think I can post. I think I can post it on the Beyond Sight and Sound Facebook probably.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because if it shows up there, I'll be sure to share it over to the main page of it.
Okay. Yeah, that's perfect.
Awesome. Well, I would like to say thank you once again for taking the time to sit down with us. You've been very enlightening, educational, and informative, and an absolute pleasure to talk to.
It was great and I will definitely come back for a second show if you want me. I don't know.
Oh, I'm sure
we're getting the calls in the comments now, so.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you all enjoyed the show out there in the chat, you'd like to hear Addison back again, post up in the chat. Let him know. Let him know you were listening, you enjoyed the show. I mean, myself, I would love to have you back on the show again so that we can continue this. Really enjoying the time that we've had on the show tonight, and I would even be receptive to Jesse hanging in there with us again on it.
Absolutely. Yeah,
It'd be
just
my
let me know.
pleasure.
And if this opportunity does arise where you may be a guest speaker at the at an I&I group meeting, maybe Jesse can even get someone to video that so that some of the rest of us can actually see it as well.
Sure, yeah. Like I said, if anyone's in the Quad Cities, I think Bettendorf Library said they're going to put out their newsletter. I think it's an online newsletter now. It should. I think I speak on January 4th. But check that on the site.
Right, and I'm going to assume that's probably going to be in the afternoon.
I believe it is in the evening. Yeah, I think it's. I want to say it's at 6.
Nice. So anybody that's in the area can actually stop in and listen to you in person, maybe even get a chance to shake your hand and discuss some other topics.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think so. Well, I certainly appreciate it, and you have been an absolute pleasure to have on the show. We've tried in the past to get some archaeological perspective on the show. Sometimes they're not real receptive to that sort of thing, so kudos to you. Very commendable.
Thank you. Yep, it was a great time. Thank you very much for having me.
Awesome. Well, I will go ahead and let you and Jesse go. That way we don't keep you on much longer, and we'll be in contact. We'll see about getting you on the show again.
Sounds great. Thank you again.
You too.
Have a good night, Josh.
You two have a wonderful evening.
Everybody.
Thanks for dropping in. Well, so there we've got, obviously Addison and Jesse, and that, I don't know. I really had a good time. I really enjoyed that. That was a lot of great information to hear. And, obviously from what I'm seeing, you guys have, and gals, have already just blew my chat right out of the water. I haven't been able to follow what's going on in the chat for some time, but at least Jesse and Addison were kind of keeping an eye on that, or I know Addison was. So for those who had asked questions in the chat, hopefully we did get those answered. And thanks again to Addison for setting in with us, and for Jesse for calling in and adding that nice little surprise about running into the person who had their ring returned by Addison. That was a nice little update to hear. And I think it went very well, and that hopefully we all learned a little something tonight. It sounds like obviously Addison does see the advantage of detecting and archaeology working hand in hand, and that is something that we do see. Like he said, it seems like the archaeological community as a whole is starting to become more open-minded and receptive to the idea, thanks to Addison, the Montpelier Project, and some of the other archaeologists out there that have been receptive to this sort of thing. And that's great that they are basically being trendsetters in a sense, paving the road for us so that those of us who are serious in the hobby and serious about history and trying to do things in a very professional and ethical way can continue, and we're viewed with a little more credence, if you will, because people are seeing it and experiencing it firsthand. So, yeah, if you're in the Bettendorf area, by all means, check out Addison at his talk there. And hopefully, if you're a member of the I&I group and you do participate in the club meetings, I think I'd be looking forward to that. I do believe that Jesse probably will approach Addison and see about having him come in as a guest speaker. I know the I&I group does have guest speakers occasionally at their group meetings, and I think it would be a really great thing to do. It would most likely be a great experience for Addison, as well as for some of the detectorists there. just like tonight on the show. Hopefully it was a good experience for Addison. I know it was a good experience for me, and the way it looked in the chat, a number of other people enjoyed it as well. So we're going to go ahead and fix to roll on out of here and all of that. But for all of you listening, if you enjoyed the show, make sure and throw us a like. Follow us here on Spreaker. Follow us on Facebook, iTunes, many of the other wonderful distribution services out there. And recently, World of Tokens group, Gordon and his gang, broke 400 members. So kudos to Gordon and his admins, Cody and Mike. They're doing a great job over there. Keep up the good work, guys. And for Addison, keep up the good work. And obviously, Jesse will continue to keep up the good work as well. So we hope everyone enjoyed the show. Have a wonderful evening, folks. We're out of here. See you on the pages.